Welcome, listeners. Tonight, a lesson at a Galactic Academy turns into a fight for survival when a real distress signal shatters the classroom. Cadets who studied war in theory are thrown into a living nightmare of vacuum, failing systems, and an enemy that learns as it hunts. At the center stands Commander Vera, forced to choose between protocol and conscience. Stay with us as survival reveals who they truly are. Pressure alarms screamed before Commander Vera spoke a single word. The Academy lecture hall lights flickered red as the central holo display tore open into static, then resolved into chaos, a human outpost corridor, atmosphere venting in violent white plumes. Metal shrieked, sparks rained like falling stars. A human soldier slammed a manual seal shut with one hand while dragging an unconscious alien with the other, boots scraping across the deck as gravity faltered. Oxygen vapor curled around them like ghost smoke. Someone in the classroom gasped. Vera didn't turn. Her eyes stayed locked on the feed as the soldier staggered. Suit ruptured, blood globules drifting in 0G. "Today's lecture," she said quietly, voice cutting through the alarms, "is survival." The human should have collapsed. Every metric on the flickering feed said so. Pressure loss, suit breach, blood oxygen falling. Yet the soldier forced one boot in front of the other, hauling the alien's limp body by a tether clipped to their own belt. Each step was a stagger. Each breath, a ragged rasp, fogging the inside of a cracked visor. Debris drifted past like slow shrapnel in a drowning sea of air and light. A panel exploded behind them, shockwave rippling through loose cables. The soldier didn't look back. One gloved hand pressed against the suit tear. The other dragged, pulled, refused to let go. Gravity flickered off. Both bodies lifted. The human hooked a boot under a handrail and kept moving anyway. Commander Vera did not blink as the feed shook with another impact. The classroom trembled from distant Academy generators compensating for the broadcast surge. But she stood motionless at the front, hands clasped behind her back. The red glow of emergency light reflected across her prosthetic ocular lens, turning it into a cold ember. Behind her, cadets shifted, breath hitching, chitin plates rattling, membranes fluttering in fear. She ignored them. On screen, the human slammed into a bulkhead, nearly losing grip on the alien they carried, then pushed off again. Stubborn as gravity itself, Vera's voice came low, controlled, carved from old memory. "Observe. This is the moment most species stop." A sharp tone cut through the hall, higher than the alarms, thin and desperate. The holo feed stuttered, image fragmenting into static grids, then reassembled into a narrow-band transmission window. Text scrolled in broken bursts. "Mayday, hull breach, bioform incursion, casualties exceeding containment." Audio bled in under heavy distortion, a human voice fighting signal collapse, breath hitching between words. "Outpost Kepri, systems failing, request immediate." The rest dissolved into noise. Behind the message, silhouettes moved fast through smoke, muzzle flashes lighting the corridor like lightning in a storm cloud. Pressure numbers plunged, one by one. Green life sign icons flickered amber, then red. The classroom air felt suddenly thinner, though nothing had changed. Vera watched the data stream without speaking, jaw set, eyes reflecting the dying signal as if it were a memory returning to claim her. Silence pressed heavier than vacuum. The distress signal looped on the holo display, its fractured plea echoing through the lecture hall like a pulse that refused to die. Cadets looked to Commander Vera, waiting for orders that protocol had already written for her. Observe. Record. Do not intervene. Confederation neutrality. Strategic non-engagement. Words designed to keep commanders clean. Vera's jaw tightened. On screen, another life sign winked out. Her prosthetic lens flickered as archived combat data surfaced. Same telemetry, same helpless distance. A student whispered, "We can't deploy, can we?" Vera didn't answer at first. She stepped closer to the console. Hand hovering over the command interface, fingers trembling once before going still. Rules were built for stability, not extinction. Behind her calm posture, an old memory burned, a human dragging her to safety while bleeding out. The signal crackled again. This time, she didn't hesitate. The hangar doors peeled open with a groan that echoed through the Academy's superstructure. Cold starlight flooded the bay, washing over the sleek hull of the training corvette as it powered up far beyond its intended limits. Cadets strapped in with shaking hands, displays flaring to life in sharp blue grids. Outside, the distress beacon pulsed like a dying heartbeat against the black. "We enter without fleet support," Vera said over the comm, voice level. "Final. From this point on, theory ends." Engines thundered, vibrations crawling through the deck as the ship lifted, clearing the magnetic clamps in a spray of frost crystals. The nav computer plotted a jump vector straight into contaminated space. Hazard warnings stacking across the screen in red. No one spoke. Stars stretched into white lines, and the Academy vanished behind them. The corvette dropped from transit into debris. Shards of alloy hull plating drifted past the viewport, spinning slowly like frozen shrapnel. The human outpost hung ahead, broken open along its midsection. Atmosphere venting in a pale, continuous plume that glowed in the distant star's light. Docking arms dangled, snapped cables trailing like severed nerves. Proximity alarms chimed as micro-fragments pinged against the shields. "Relative velocity, reduce," a cadet breathed, voice tight. Vera guided the approach manually, thrusters firing in short bursts that shuddered through the frame. Inside the exposed hangar, emergency strobes pulsed red through smoke and floating debris. A lifeless cargo crate drifted past, followed by something darker that rotated slowly out of view. No power signatures in half the structure, no return fire, just silence, and the wound of space widening. They found him in the auxiliary command bay, one deck below the breach line. The hatch had been forced open from the inside, edges scorched where a cutting torch had chewed through warped metal. Marcus Hale stood at the center console, helmet off, gray in his beard, sleeves rolled over scar-lined arms. A field tourniquet cinched his thigh, dark with old blood. He didn't look surprised to see them, just tired. Behind him, hollow schematics flickered with failing systems, biosignatures blooming like infection across the station map. "You're late," he said, voice rough but steady, eyes locking on Vera with recognition that cut through years. Around him, 2 wounded humans and a trembling alien technician worked in silence, hands moving fast, fear held tight behind discipline. A vibration rolled through the deck, subtle at first, then rising into a low, living hum that crawled up through boots and bones. The tactical display bloomed with motion, heat signatures multiplying in tight, coordinated patterns along the station's lower corridors. Not soldiers, not machines, biological mass, shifting and reconfiguring as it advanced. Hale killed the overhead lights without looking away from the screen. Emergency strips painted everything in red shadow. Somewhere deep in the structure, metal screamed as something tore through a bulkhead from the inside. A cadet swallowed hard. "They're regrouping?" Hale shook his head once. "They're learning." The word settled heavier than gravity. Another impact hit, closer this time. Dust raining from the ceiling as the swarm changed direction, toward them. The pressure gauge dipped into yellow, then edged toward red. Someone swore under their breath as a soft hiss began to snake through the compartment. Almost gentle, like a leak you could ignore, until you couldn't. Hale slapped a portable sealant patch over a hairline crack in the bulkhead, while a cadet recalculated breathable volume. Hands shaking over the console. "We have 11 minutes at current loss," the cadet said. Voice thin. Vera moved fast, ripping open an emergency O2 canister and routing a hose into the central line. Air thundered back through the vents, cold and metallic. Condensation fogged the deck. Every breath sounded too loud inside helmets. Outside the thin wall, something scraped past. Searching. No one spoke again. Oxygen was time, and time was bleeding away. Blood beaded in slow spheres where gravity faltered, drifting between flickering lights and the smell of burnt insulation. The alien technician's side was open to the suit's inner mesh, bioluminescent fluid pulsing with each strained breath. "Pressure clamp," Vera said, already gloved hands deep in the field kit. A cadet locked the mag seals, while Hale bit down on a strap and tightened the tourniquet on his own leg without looking away from the corridor cam. The swarm thudded somewhere beyond the bulkhead, a wet percussion. Vera sprayed coagulant foam, packed the wound, sealed the suit breach with a heated patch. The patient convulsed, then stilled to a shallow rhythm. "We move in 30 seconds. Hale rasped. Pain could wait. Infection couldn't. Neither could the enemy. A cadet's breathing spiked on the squad channel. Sharp. Fast. The sound of control slipping. Their vitals flared amber on Vera's display. Another impact boomed through the corridor, dust cascading like ash. Someone backed into a console, knocking tools into a slow tumble. "They're in the ducts," a voice cracked. Hale turned, eyes hard. "Focus." But panic moved quicker than orders, a contagion no filter could catch. The cadet fumbled their rifle, hands slick inside the gloves. Vera stepped close, helmet to helmet, her voice cutting through the noise. "Look at me. Count your breaths." She matched the rhythm, slow, deliberate. The cadet's pulse dipped, steadied. Another thud. Closer. Vera keyed the team. "Fear is data. Use it. Move." They dropped through a maintenance shaft into the station's geothermal sublevel. Boots splashing into shallow condensation pooled across the metal floor. The air was warmer here, thick with the smell of coolant and mineral steam. Emergency strips cast a dim amber glow along curved walls, reinforced against core pressure. Hale sealed the hatch above them with a manual lock. Metal clanging into place as distant impacts dulled to a muffled tremor. Portable lamps flickered on, revealing survivors huddled near an auxiliary reactor column. Faces pale beneath grime-streaked visors. A barricade of tool carts and cargo crates blocked the main access corridor. For the first time since boarding, no alarms screamed, just breath, engines humming far below, and the fragile illusion that the walls might hold. The temporary quiet pressed in, heavy as the rock above them. Someone passed a ration tube down the line, hands brushing in silent thanks. Hale sat against the reactor column, helmet resting beside him, eyes unfocused for a moment too long. A cadet asked how many were left topside. Hale didn't answer directly. He named them instead. Engineer Kova, who kept power flowing through a flooded conduit. Sergeant Imani, who held a corridor alone until her rifle overheated. Pilot Reyes, who vented an entire hangar to stop the spread. Each name landed like weight in the dim chamber. No grand speeches, just facts. Lives measured in minutes, bought for others. The cadets listened, and the refuge felt smaller, built not from metal, but from the cost already paid. A soft chime cut through the refuge, subtle but wrong. One of the cadets leaned over a portable scanner, mandibles tightening. "Movement pattern shift," they whispered. The display filled with branching lines, the swarm's heat signatures reorganizing, no longer flooding corridors blindly, but circling choke points, testing pressure seals, probing vents. Hale stood, fatigue gone in an instant. "They mapped us," he said. Vera watched the vectors converge toward the geothermal shafts. A maintenance drone feed flickered on, showing a duct grill bulging inward, metal warping from repeated impacts. The barricade suddenly looked decorative. Someone started to speak, then stopped. The hum in the walls deepened, rhythmic, purposeful. Not hunger. Strategy. The enemy wasn't chasing them anymore. It was predicting them. Lights blinked once, twice, then dropped to a thin emergency glow that painted the refuge in dying amber. The reactor's hum faltered into an uneven pulse, like a heart missing beats. Displays around the room sputtered into static. "Grid instability," a cadet called. Voice tight as coolant vapor thickened the air. Hale was already at the control junction, prying open a panel and rerouting conduits by hand, sparks biting through his gloves. A low boom rolled through the deck as something heavy struck the outer casing. Temperature rose fast. Breath fogged visors, then cleared as fans slowed. Vera watched the power bars sink, one subsystem after another going dark, without light, without heat control, without seals. This place wasn't a refuge. It was a coffin waiting to close. A cadet's voice cut across the channel, thin but clear. "We can't hold this. The ship still has range. We extract now. Just us." No one spoke for a heartbeat. Then another impact rattled the barricade, tools clattering in nervous orbits. Hale didn't look up from the junction, blood seeping through the tourniquet wrap. "Say it plain," he said. The cadet swallowed. "We leave the humans." The words hung, colder than vacuum. A survivor near the wall didn't react, just tightened a seal on their friend's mask. Vera stepped forward, visor reflecting the red flicker. "You're proposing survival by subtraction," she said. Voice even. "Count the air, count the seats, count who taught you to breathe this long." The next impact came closer. No one repeated the idea. The reactor readouts crawled toward failure, red bars shrinking with each uneven pulse. Hale braced one hand on the console to stay upright. Vision swimming, but steady. The cadets waited. Every visor turned toward Vera. She could feel the weight of command pressing down, heavier than gravity ever was. Retreat meant survival, for some. Staying meant buying minutes with blood. Her gaze drifted to Hale's leg, to the survivors clutching each other in silence, to the trembling cadet who had suggested leaving. Years ago, a human had dragged her through vacuum, refusing to quit until she lived. Vera keyed the squad channel. "Evac group forms now," she said. Then, quieter. To Hale, "We hold the breach." The evac plan dissolved the moment it touched reality. Corridors marked sealed were open wounds. Air maps already obsolete. A cadet rerouted the shuttle's autopilot to manual override, hands moving before permission came. Another vented a storage bay to slow the swarm's advance, sacrificing supplies for seconds. "That's against," someone began, then stopped as the pressure spike bought them passage. Hale barked new vectors. Vera approved them with a nod. Not a checklist. They cut through a maintenance crawl space, mag boots scraping sparks, dragging stretchers through a gap too small for protocol to imagine. Doors were blown, lines crossed, procedures ignored. Every rule bent into a tool. The path forward wasn't authorized. It was possible, and that was enough. The corridor buckled inward with a shriek of tearing metal, and Hale was already moving when the swarm burst through. He shoved a cadet clear, fired a short burst that lit the passage in white flashes. Then the floor gave way beneath him. He hit hard, sliding toward the ruptured edge where atmosphere screamed into space. Vera lunged, catching his harness just as something slashed across his back. Suit integrity dropping in a blink. Warning tones howled in her ears. Hale's rifle drifted from numb fingers, spinning away into the void. Blood misted inside his helmet, but his eyes stayed sharp. "Go," he rasped, trying to push her hand away. She tightened her grip instead. Boots locked to the deck, dragging him back inch by stubborn inch. Vera hauled Hale behind the shattered bulkhead, just as the swarm poured through the breach in a churning wave of chitin and muscle. She braced the heavy service door half shut, sparks spitting from its ruined hinge, while a cadet jammed a power cell into the manual lock. The corridor beyond became a tunnel of muzzle flashes and ricocheting debris. Hale, barely upright, dragged himself to the doorway and fired one-handed. Each shot buying a breath. "They move on sound," he rasped. Vera slammed a sonic beacon down the opposite hall. The swarm veered, colliding in violent confusion. "Evac group, move!" she barked, holding position as the last silhouettes vanished into smoke. The line held, but only just. They reached the core chamber through a service conduit hot enough to warp the soles of their boots. The reactor tower rose in the center like a caged sun, coolant lines hissing, warning sigils crawling across the air in red. Hale leaned on the rail, blood dark under his suit, and keyed the manual access with shaking fingers. Vera ripped open the panel and yanked the safeties, hand steady, mind colder than the steel around them. "Overload curve?" she asked. Hale met her eyes. "We get one chance." The deck shuddered as the swarm hit the outer ring, a dull thunder that shook dust from the ceiling. Vera primed the lure beacon and sent it pinging down the corridor. "Bring them," she said. The core began to sing. Static crawled across the comm panel as Vera forced the channel open, signal power spiking against the failing grid. "Evac shuttle, confirm launch," she said, voice steady despite the tremor in the deck. A cadet's reply cut through. Breathless. "We're clear. All survivors aboard." Hale sagged against the railing, watching the reactor climb toward critical. Vera switched frequencies, sending one last burst toward open space. "Academy Command, this is Commander Vera. Containment solution in progress. Do not approach." The words felt small against the rising hum, but necessary. She muted the line before anyone could answer. Around them, the chamber glowed brighter, heat crawling through armor. Hale gave a tired half-smile. "Always hated paperwork anyway." The swarm hit the chamber in a living tide, just as the reactor crossed the threshold. Metal shrieked, bodies slammed against the containment rails, claws scraping sparks in wild arcs. Vera locked the final override and tore the control rod free, the core's light flaring from angry red to blinding white. Heat punched through armor, turning breath into fire. Hale steadied himself beside her, one hand braced on the rail, the other still gripping an empty rifle like a promise kept too long. The station groaned, structure failing in cascading fractures. For a heartbeat, everything froze, light, sound, motion. Then the chamber vanished in a silent bloom that swallowed steel. Swarm and memory alike. The shuttle drifted on minimal thrust, engines whispering instead of roaring. No one spoke. Emergency lights cast a soft blue wash across helmets streaked with soot and dried sealant. A stretcher floated between seats, straps tight. The rescued alien breathing shallow but steady. One cadet stared at their gloved hands as if seeing them for the first time. Fingers still trembling. Another replayed sensor logs on a dim panel, watching the white bloom that erased the station. Then, turning the display off without a word. The air smelled of coolant and burned insulation. Somewhere in the hull, a loose panel ticked as it cooled. They had oxygen. They had distance. What they didn't have was the illusion they'd boarded with. No one asked if they had done the right thing. The question had burned away with the station. A cadet rerouted life support without prompting, trimming non-essential draw to stabilize reserves. Another checked on the wounded alien, hands sure now, voice low and steady through the comm. Someone logged the dead, not as numbers, but as names Hale had spoken. The silence in the cabin felt different, no longer shock, but weight accepted. They had broken rules, bent plans, chosen who they would be when retreat was easier. Outside, stars slid past the viewport, indifferent. Inside, discipline held, born not from drills, but from a line they had stood together. No one called it bravery. They called it the only move left. The after-action console hovered between them, waiting. One cadet began the report, voice level, facts aligned like bolts in a frame. Response vessel entered hazard zone under instructional authority. Another inserted system failures, time stamps, oxygen metrics, when the line for initiating cause appeared. There was a pause, brief but shared. Reactor cascade due to uncontrollable bioform breach, the cadet said, and no one corrected it. Names followed in the casualty field: engineer, sergeant, pilot, spelled carefully. No mention of orders broken. Safeties bypassed, choices made in heat and smoke. The truth lived in memory, not paperwork. The file sealed with a soft chime. Outside, the stars kept their distance. Inside, the cost sat quietly among them, accounted for, unspoken. The lecture hall lights rose on schedule, pale and indifferent, but the room felt smaller without her at the front. Vera's podium stood where it always had, its surface clean, console dark. The hollow display cycled through archived lessons, frozen on a corridor filled with smoke and drifting debris. Seats filled slowly, cadets taking their places without chatter, helmets tucked under arms like something fragile. A faint hum from the academy's generators echoed in the high ceiling, too loud in the quiet. Someone set a data slate on the podium, field notes, sealed. No one touched it. They watched the empty space where orders used to come from, waiting for a voice that had already spent its last command elsewhere. A single cadet stepped down from the second row. Movements deliberate. No hesitation left in the gait. They placed their helmet on the instructor's desk, the surface reflecting a faint scorch mark still etched along its rim. Fingers hovered over the console, then activated the holo feed. The image that filled the hall was not a diagram or simulation. But the raw sensor capture of the station's final moments, pressure alarms, heat bloom, bodies moving anyway. The cadet didn't face the class at first, eyes fixed on the footage. When they spoke, the voice was steady, stripped of ceremony. Lesson 1, they said. Survival is not a rule set. It's a decision. No one looked away. The hollow feed faded, leaving only the reflection of stars drifting across the high glass of the Academy dome. No one moved. The cadet at the front rested a hand on the console where Vera once stood, fingers brushing the cool metal as if it still carried heat. Beyond the dome, distant traffic lights traced quiet lines through space. Life continuing, unaware of the cost paid on a broken station light years away. Humans don't quit, the cadet said softly, not as praise, not as legend, but as a fact learned in fire. Around the room, heads lowered, not in mourning alone, but in understanding. The lesson had ended. The inheritance had begun. In the end, survival was not just about air, armor, or escape. It was about identity. These cadets learned that command means choosing who you are when fear and loss close in, and that courage often looks like refusing to quit when quitting would be easier. If this story moved you, follow the channel and join us for more cinematic journeys into the limits of humanity, survival, and the stars beyond.